Family eats here, Emily. Aunt Patricia's voice carried across the private dining room as she pointed toward a folding chair beside the service station. Go find a seat near the trash cans. For 1 second, nobody moved. Emily Carter stood at the end of the long table, still holding the wrapped anniversary gift she had brought for the family reunion. Every proper chair was occupied, though 2 cousins had handbags resting on empty seats beside them. A few relatives laughed under their breath. Emily looked from the white tablecloths and crystal glasses to the lonely chair squeezed between a cart of dirty dishes and 2 black waste bins. Is this a joke? She asked. Patricia smiled. Don't make everything dramatic. You arrived late, so you sit where there's space. Emily had arrived exactly when the invitation said. Still, she placed the gift on the table, carried her plate to the folding chair, and sat while servers maneuvered around her. 20 minutes later, Patricia raised her champagne glass. To family, she announced. Everyone joined the toast except Emily. She watched Uncle Raymond drink from a glass purchased with money she had quietly sent during his hospital crisis. Cousin Lauren wore the graduation necklace Emily had bought after paying the final portion of her tuition. Patricia sat at the head of the table accepting gratitude for helping them both. No one mentioned Emily. When dessert arrived, a waiter approached Patricia with a leather folder. Patricia barely glanced at it before pointing toward the service station. She handles these things. The waiter turned and walked directly to Emily. He placed the folder beside her teacup. Inside was a bill for *3, 450 ***. The room fell silent. Lauren leaned toward another cousin and whispered, She'll pay, she always does. Patricia folded her arms. Well, Emily, don't keep the waiter standing there. Emily studied the total, then looked at the relatives who had refused to save her a seat but had apparently saved the entire bill for her. She lifted her tea and took 1 slow sip. Then she closed the folder and slid it back. The waiter didn't look surprised. Instead, he lowered his voice. Would you like me to deliver your message to the event manager? Emily met his eyes. Yes. As he walked away, Patricia's smile vanished. Because for the first time that evening, she realized the waiter wasn't asking Emily for payment. He was asking for permission. The waiter disappeared through the dining room doors without taking the leather folder. A puzzled silence settled over the table. Patricia was the first to recover. She gave a dismissive laugh and cut into her cheesecake. Oh, honestly, Emily, if you're trying to make some grand statement, it's falling a little flat. A few relatives chuckled, relieved someone had broken the tension. Emily simply rested both hands around her teacup. She wasn't interested in performing. She was waiting. Patricia shook her head dramatically. You've always loved attention. Everyone knows you'll pay eventually, you always do. Emily looked across the table without answering. For years, those same words had followed every family gathering. Emily will handle it. Emily doesn't mind. She's doing well financially. None of them ever asked. They simply expected. Her thoughts drifted back several years. Cousin Lauren had nearly dropped out of college after losing a scholarship. Patricia had called Emily in tears. If she can't finish school, it'll ruin her future. Emily wired the tuition the same afternoon. At graduation, Patricia stood proudly in front of the entire family. We all pulled together to make this happen. Emily's name wasn't mentioned once. Another memory surfaced. Uncle Raymond had needed emergency surgery. Patricia claimed insurance delays had left them desperate. Emily emptied part of her savings without hesitation. Weeks later, Raymond hugged Patricia during a family barbecue. I don't know what we'd have done without you. Patricia accepted every word. Emily stood beside the grill carrying drinks. Invisible again. That was the pattern. She paid. Patricia accepted the praise. Everyone else accepted the story. Not because they hated Emily. because believing Patricia was easier than asking uncomfortable questions. Emily slowly looked around the private dining room. Nothing about tonight was really about money. The chair beside the trash bins, the family toast without her, the expectation she'd quietly pay thousands of dollars after being humiliated. It all served one purpose: to remind everyone exactly where Patricia believed Emily belonged. Useful, generous, outside the circle. Across the room, the waiter spoke quietly with the restaurant manager. The manager glanced toward Emily. His expression changed almost immediately. He nodded once, then started walking toward the family's table before another employee intercepted him with a brief whisper. The manager paused, listened carefully, then altered his path and disappeared through a nearby office door. Emily noticed. She didn't react. Patricia leaned back confidently. "You know," she announced loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear, "some people should remember who gave them a place in this family." Several relatives awkwardly nodded. Nobody challenged her. Emily lowered her eyes for only a moment. Then she reached into her handbag. Patricia smirked. "There it is." She assumed Emily was finally taking out her credit card. Instead, Emily removed a neatly folded cream-colored envelope. It was thick, carefully sealed. She placed it quietly beside her untouched dessert. No logos, no handwriting visible. Just one envelope she had carried into the restaurant before anyone else arrived. Lauren frowned. "What's in that?" Emily smiled politely. "You'll know when the time is right." The answer unsettled Patricia far more than an argument would have. Before anyone could ask another question, footsteps approached. The restaurant manager stopped beside Emily's chair. He straightened his jacket, offered a respectful smile, and addressed her first. "Good evening, Miss Carter." Patricia's confident expression faltered. "Good evening, Miss Carter." The restaurant manager's greeting immediately drew every pair of eyes toward Emily. Patricia frowned. Before Emily could answer, Patricia leaned forward with an impatient smile. "She's just deciding how she'd like to pay the bill." The manager politely shook his head. "Actually, ma'am, I'm here regarding another matter." The room fell quiet again. Emily rose slightly from her folding chair, not fully standing, just enough to return the manager's greeting. "Good evening." He nodded respectfully. "I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but would now be an appropriate time to discuss the documents you requested." Emily glanced around the table. "Not quite yet." "I understand." The manager gave a small nod, prepared to leave. Patricia stopped him. "Excuse me." Her voice was noticeably sharper. "What documents?" The manager hesitated. "I'm afraid that's a private matter." Patricia gave a short laugh. "Private, we're family." Emily answered before the manager could. "Some conversations are better handled after dessert." The calmness in her voice irritated Patricia even more. "What exactly are you trying to prove?" Emily didn't respond. Instead, she took another sip of her tea. The silence forced Patricia to continue speaking. "You've made everyone uncomfortable over a restaurant bill." Emily looked up. "No, Patricia. This dinner became uncomfortable long before the bill arrived." Several relatives quietly lowered their eyes. No one argued, because everyone knew she was right. The manager remained beside the table. He neither interrupted nor left. He simply waited. Patricia pointed toward the leather folder still resting near Emily's plate. "If she refuses to pay, then tell us now." The manager answered carefully. "The bill is only one matter." His words landed like a stone. "Only one matter." Lauren exchanged a worried glance with Uncle Raymond. "What does that mean?" No one had an answer. Emily picked up the cream-colored envelope she had placed beside her dessert. She carefully opened the flap. Inside were several neatly organized documents. She read only the first page. Satisfied, she slid everything back inside and resealed the envelope. Not a single person at the table caught more than a glimpse. Patricia's curiosity quickly turned into uneasiness. "What are you hiding?" Emily calmly placed the envelope back beside her plate. "I'm hiding nothing." "Then let us see it." "When it's time." The refusal only deepened everyone's uncertainty. Trying to regain control, Patricia addressed the entire table. "I've organized every reunion for 15 years. She gestured proudly around the elegant private dining room. "I've handled every reservation, every payment arrangement, every family event." Several relatives nodded automatically. Those words had become part of Patricia's identity. She was the organizer, the decision-maker, the one everyone relied on. The manager listened quietly. Then he spoke. "Mrs. Bennett." Patricia smiled, expecting support. Instead he finished. "That's exactly why we need to speak." Her smile disappeared. For the first time that evening, even neighboring diners seemed aware something unusual was unfolding. Conversation throughout the private room softened. Every member of the Carter family watched the manager. Then another restaurant employee appeared. He carried a thick black portfolio secured with metal clasps. Unlike an ordinary folder, this one looked formal. "Official." The employee stopped beside the manager and handed it over without saying a word. The manager accepted it carefully. He placed the portfolio on an empty service table a few feet from Emily. No one touched it. No one spoke. Patricia stared at the portfolio as though it had suddenly become the most important object in the room. Emily slowly looked from the portfolio to her aunt. Then she quietly pushed her chair back. The scraping of Emily's folding chair across the polished floor echoed through the private dining room. She stood without touching the thick black portfolio. Instead, she looked directly at Patricia. There was no anger in her expression, only quiet resolve. "When were you planning to tell everyone about the mortgage?" Patricia's face lost its color. "Though what?" Several relatives looked back and forth between them. Uncle Raymond frowned. "Mortgage?" Lauren blinked in confusion. "I thought the restaurant had been paid off years ago." Patricia recovered quickly enough to force a laugh. "I don't know what she's talking about." Emily held her gaze. "You do." The room became still. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply spoke one fact at a time. This property nearly entered foreclosure several months ago. A gasp escaped someone near the end of the table. Patricia immediately shook her head. "That's ridiculous. I already handled everything." Emily answered just as calmly. "Public records say otherwise." The confidence in Patricia's posture began to crack. For the first time all evening, she had no prepared speech. Several younger cousins instinctively reached for their phones. "What address is this place under?" one whispered. Another quietly searched county property records. No one was joking anymore. The atmosphere around the table had completely changed. This was no longer about a dinner bill. It was about something much bigger. Uncle Raymond slowly cleared his throat. There was something. Every head turned toward him. He looked embarrassed. "A few months ago Patricia asked if I could loan her some money." Patricia immediately interrupted. "That was unrelated." Raymond continued anyway. "She said there was temporary paperwork with the property. I never said anything because she promised it would be settled within days." Emily said nothing. She simply allowed the words to settle over the room. One piece fit another. Then another. Relatives began exchanging uncertain looks. Patricia folded her arms. So now everyone believes this. Emily answered quietly. I wanted you to tell them. Patricia scoffed. There was nothing to tell. Emily finally revealed another piece. Months ago I started receiving calls from the bank. Patricia's eyes widened. Emily continued. My late mother's name was still connected to part of the original ownership records. Several relatives looked genuinely surprised. Most of them hadn't even known Emily's mother had once held an ownership interest connected to the property. I assumed there had been some mistake, Emily said. So I asked for the documents. She paused. I discovered the loan payments had stopped. No one interrupted. I could have walked away. I could have let the foreclosure happen. I could have allowed everyone to find out through a public notice. Instead, she looked around the table. I chose not to. Lauren whispered. Why? Emily answered honestly. Because I didn't want this family humiliated. Those words landed harder than any accusation. Patricia's composure finally broke. She's twisting everything. She doesn't know what she's talking about. The outburst echoed through the dining room. Several nearby guests turned toward the private room. Emily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked to the service table. She rested one hand on the thick black portfolio. Still, she didn't open it. She looked at Patricia one final time. Then toward the restaurant manager. I'm ready. The manager gave a slow, respectful nod. Every relative watched in complete silence as Emily unclasped the first metal fastener and lifted the cover. Emily opened the portfolio with steady hands. Inside were neatly organized legal documents, payment records, certified notices, and copies of property filings. She removed the first page and placed it gently on the table. I didn't bring these here to embarrass anyone, she said. I brought them because this should have been explained months ago. No one spoke. Even Patricia remained silent. Emily looked around the table before continuing. Several months ago, the mortgage on this restaurant stopped being paid. Patricia finally found her voice. That's none of their business. It became everyone's business, Emily replied calmly, when the property was days away from foreclosure. A murmur swept through the family. Lauren covered her mouth. Uncle Raymond slowly leaned back in his chair. Emily continued. The bank contacted me because my mother's name was still connected to the original ownership documents from years ago. At first I assumed it was an administrative mistake. It wasn't. She slid another document across the table. The loan was in default. Patricia shook her head. You don't understand how businesses work. I understand missed payments, Emily answered. I understand foreclosure notices, and I understand legal deadlines. The restaurant manager quietly stepped forward. Everything Ms. Carter has stated is accurate. The words landed like a hammer. Emily continued. I had two choices. I could let the bank repossess the building, or I could purchase the distressed mortgage before the foreclosure process was completed. She looked at every member of her family. I chose the second option. Silence. No one had expected those words. Lauren blinked. You bought the mortgage. Emily nodded. Using my own savings and investment income. Another document slid onto the table. When the repayment deadlines passed without being met, ownership legally transferred according to the loan agreement. Patricia stared at the papers. No. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. No, that's impossible. It isn't, the manager said respectfully. The transfer was completed several weeks ago. Emily folded her hands. I never announced it because I hoped you would tell everyone the truth yourself. Patricia looked away. She couldn't. She never had. The years of pretending had finally caught up with her. Emily glanced toward the leather bill folder, still resting beside her untouched dessert. Now let's clear up one more misunderstanding. She picked it up. When this was placed in front of me, everyone assumed I was expected to pay because that's what I've always done. Several relatives lowered their eyes. Emily smiled faintly. The waiter wasn't asking me to cover everyone's dinner. She turned toward the manager. He was asking me, as the property's legal owner, whether I wanted this private event charged to the restaurant or collected tonight. Understanding spread across the room. One face after another changed. Patricia had assumed the bill would become another obligation Emily quietly accepted. Instead, it had become proof that everything had already changed. Emily gently slid the leather folder back across the table. I won't be paying for a dinner where I was told I wasn't family. She looked at the manager. Please divide the balance evenly among every adult guest. The manager nodded. Of course, Ms. Carter. No one protested. No one dared. The only sound was the quiet rustling of individual checks being prepared. Lauren stood first. Tears filled her eyes. Emily, I didn't know. I know, Emily answered. You should have, Patricia snapped. Lauren turned toward her aunt. No. Her voice was firmer than anyone expected. We should have asked questions years ago. One by one, other relatives began speaking. Uncle Raymond apologized for never asking where the money for his surgery had truly come from. Another cousin admitted Patricia had always insisted she alone had handled every family emergency. An aunt quietly confessed she had believed Patricia because it seemed easier than looking deeper. Patricia remained seated at the head of the table. For years that seat had symbolized authority. Now it only emphasized how alone she had become. The respect she had enjoyed hadn't disappeared because Emily exposed her. It disappeared because the truth left nothing standing underneath it. Emily gathered the documents and returned them to the portfolio. She looked at Patricia one last time. I'm not ending relationships over money. Patricia didn't answer. Emily continued. I'm ending the belief that kindness means permanent obligation. No one challenged her. The words were too true. Over the following months, Emily hired experienced professionals to manage the restaurant and protect the employees whose jobs had nearly vanished during the financial crisis. The business stabilized. Customers never knew how close it had come to closing. Some relatives reached out, not asking for loans, favors, or rescue, but simply asking if they could start over. Emily accepted some apologies. Others she politely declined. She no longer confused forgiveness with surrendering her boundaries. Family gatherings eventually returned. This time, invitations arrived without expectations attached. When Emily walked into a room, someone always saved her a proper seat. Not because she owned the restaurant, because they had finally learned to respect the person they had overlooked for years. As for Patricia, she never again controlled where people sat, who belonged, or who carried the cost of keeping the family together. And whenever someone asked Emily why she had calmly slid that $3,450 check back across the table instead of paying it, she answered with the same quiet certainty. I stopped paying for a place at a table where I'd never truly been welcome,